Hello and welcome to the Careers in Government edition of the Professional Insight Series. We're here tonight with 4 esteemed SHEP alumni, and I am so excited to hear more about their experiences and their words of wisdom that they have to share with SHEP alums like you. So I'll start off by asking each panelist to tell us a little bit about him or herself, where they grew up, where they went to school, what they studied, and if they have any postgraduate degrees. And then we'll jump into a little bit more SHEP specific information. So Paige, would you like to start us off?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Paige Coomer. I am from a town no one has ever heard of in Kentucky. It is like 5,000 people, so trust me.
What's the name of your town? What's the name of your hometown?
It's called Columbia.
Okay, that's important.
So I went to Center College. I graduated in 2014 with a degree in English. After that, I went straight to Indiana University Maurer School of Law. And now I'm in Atlanta working. So I'm so excited to be here and talk to all of you guys.
Thanks, Paige. Noelle?
Hi, good evening. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Noelle Camp. I attended Washington and Lee University and graduated in 2017 with a degree in global politics. After that, I went to Texas A&M to the Bush School of Government and Public Service and graduated with my master's degree in international affairs in 2019. And I'm originally from St. Petersburg, Florida, but nowadays I'm based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I work for Sandia National Laboratories.
Thank you. Brennan?
Hi, my name is Brennen Amonett. I too went to Center College, and I too am from a relatively small town in Kentucky called Bowling Green. So I know Columbia a little bit.
Yay!
And I graduated in 2019 from Center. I was a double major in drama and international studies. So an interesting combo. And these days I live in Louisville, Kentucky and work out of Frankfurt. And I work for the Lieutenant Governor's office as one of her communications advisors, essentially.
I love that liberal arts combination.
Me too. Great. It's very
What
good.
about you, LeGrand?
Hi, everyone. I'm LeGrand Northcutt. Please forgive me. I'm actually on vacation in my childhood bedroom, and so the lighting is not optimal for Zoom. But I graduated with Noelle from Washington and Lee in 2017. I was an English major, and I then went to University of Richmond School of Law, and I just graduated in May. And now I work for the Governor of Virginia. I'm in the Council of the Governor's office. I'm from Longview, Texas, which is where I am right now. It's a, I don't know, medium-sized town in Northeast Texas, between Shreveport, Louisiana, and Dallas.
Very cool. We could have a whole other section on how people ended up where they are, but we won't get into that tonight.
Right.
Jim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jim Langford. I'm the executive director of SHEP, and I'm a Georgia native. I lived a lot of places, done a lot of weird things. I have a political background, worked on Capitol Hill in Washington when I was 18 and worked in various state government things in the state of Georgia, in state commissions and lots of different public policy areas as well. And so, this is a fun topic for me to listen in on, but I also like to advise younger people, about where they might fit, in a government role or a policy role at some place. So I'm very interested to hear what the rest of you have to say, but also hope I can contribute something. Thank you for letting me participate.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
And I'm Danielle Breidung. I'm a SHEP alumna and a graduate of Washington and Lee University. And I have the esteemed pleasure of working with the SHEP team to facilitate alumni engagement, which is why all of you are here. And this question has to do with your SHEP experiences. And if you don't mind, I'd like to open it up to the students who are also joining us tonight. I'd be curious to know from each of you, and no pressure if you don't want to share, students, but I'd like to know where you did your SHEP internship, when, and your biggest takeaway, but also why. So what was it about the SHEP program that intrigued you? And maybe we'll go in reverse order. LeGrand, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. And yeah, Danielle, thanks for hosting us and for doing this. This is really great. I wish I had this as a student. So it's great to be doing this. So I interned in Louisville, Kentucky, actually, in 2016. So after my junior year, and with a place called the Cabbage Patch Settlement House, which is a community center. They do education, after school programming, things like that. And I did their week-long summer day camps, and I was on like the sports and recreation side. So I did volleyball, tennis, basketball, canoeing, outdoors, camping, things like that with kids rotating through 1 week summer day camps, 9 to 4 kind of thing. It was really, really great. The why is kind of interesting. I'm a camp counselor at heart. And I was working on a summer camp the year before after my freshman year. And then after my sophomore year, when I was originally supposed to do my internship, I broke my hand on spring break. And so I couldn't exactly do, involved athletic, summer day camp with a broken hand. And so I had to delay my internship for a year. And then of course, in that year was my junior year of college, and where I decided to go to law school, things like that. But I still felt kind of called to this particular place and wanted to work with people that I had met and vetted and interviewed with the year before. And so that was why I continued on this, even though, I could have done something at a public defender's office or something law related, I still kept on with the youth sports camp theme. And my biggest takeaway from that, though, was the Cabbage Patch had a very holistic model. They care about education, they care about physical fitness, they care about meeting the needs of the kids, but also they do family programming, they do budgeting, they do they care about spiritual health. And so to the extent that yes, we all have passions, we all have things that we care about, but it really is important to look at things holistically. And then also taking that into law. It's not just people have a legal problem, it's that they also whether it's lack of education or healthcare, or you have never been taught how to keep budget, things like that. So really embracing a holistic view of poverty. I knew that was a thing, but being there with an organization that really practiced it was a good experience for me.
I love that. And it brought up a lot of memories. Just earlier today, I was listening to Dr. Pickett talking about the real opportunities and the barriers to opportunity that poverty sometimes presents. So kind of that holistic view of like, there's so many different facets, and where we choose to plug in really depends on our interests and our skills. So thank you for sharing that, and for your perseverance, like keeping the promise that you made, even though your circumstances changed. Brennan, how about you?
Yeah, excuse me. I interned in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is fun to say. And I interned at the public defender's office there. I guess my experience was in some ways, maybe not the opposite, but in a lot of ways contrasting to LeGrand's, in that I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I did a legal internship. And my biggest takeaway was essentially that I didn't want to be a lawyer, which I say somewhat jokingly and to two people who have law backgrounds. But it does speak to what LeGrand was saying, in that I knew that I was very passionate about this and wanted to be involved in work that dealt with issues relating to poverty, but just kind of realized that law wasn't exactly my path to doing that, which is helpful to know. I mean, I think a lot of people, when deciding what kind of internship to do, may do some little experimentation in kind of figuring out where they fit. And this program certainly helped me a lot in figuring that out for myself. And I'm really grateful for that.
That's terrific. And it is a wonderful opportunity to get that firsthand experience and figure out what you do and what you don't want to do. I love that you said that Poughkeepsie is fun to say. I always think Poughkeepsie is really fun to spell whenever I'm going to write it down. It's just a quirky name and place.
Yeah.
I've not been there, but I understand it's very beautiful.
It's very nice. Yeah, you should go.
I should after COVID, right?
Yeah.
All right, Noelle, tell us about your experience, please.
So I did my Shepherd internship in the summer of 2014, which was the summer after my freshman year of college. I think a little bit earlier than a lot of folks do their SHEP internship, but I had already been fully indoctrinated into the Shepherd program. I was a Bonner Scholar at Washington and Lee, and I had taken some courses in poverty studies already. So the Shepherd internship was a very natural extension of the academic studies and the extracurricular activities that I was doing. But it was also a great opportunity for me to get some professional experience in the field that I was interested in. At the time, I was fairly certain that I wanted to major in global politics, and I ended up interning at Refugee Resettlement and Immigration Services of Atlanta. So I was working with refugees and immigrants from a variety of countries, working most hands-on with special immigrant visa cases from Afghanistan and Iraq. And these were individuals who had served as interpreters for the US military during the conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, and whose lives were in danger because of their work for the United States, and who ultimately came to the United States. So I was helping them to find employment once they arrived. But I also got the opportunity to work with folks from around the world, including Myanmar, Sudan, Somalia, Nepal, a whole variety of countries. I think my biggest takeaway in terms of tangible skills was learning cross-cultural communication skills. And that has been invaluable in my work now. At Sandia nowadays, I host workshops with foreign governments. So the skills that I learned working with refugees as a freshman in college are applicable now to the work that I'm doing. But I think it also was helpful to actually meet people who had experienced the conflicts that I was learning about in my international relations courses. That really humanized what I was learning about in a textbook and provided context outside of kind of the academic ivory tower environment. So it was a wonderful experience for me, and just confirmed it's kind of the opposite of Brennan's experience, where he realized he didn't want to become a lawyer. For me, I realized that global politics absolutely was my passion, and went on to do more internships in that area and ultimately to work in the field.
Thank you, Noelle. That's such a great endorsement of the SHEP program. And you're so articulate. So thank you for sharing that. How about you, Paige?
Hi, so I did my internship way back in 2013. I actually think it might have been either the first or the second year that center partnered with SHEP. So it feels like it was so long ago now, but I worked with Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, which is a community organizing group that mobilizes Kentuckians around issues, particular to that state. So whether it be helping secure voting rights to ex-felons and working on, policies in line with that position, or working on transitioning to solar energy in Kentucky. It's really broad sweeping, amazing organization. And when I worked there, I did a lot of research support for them. I wrote a lot of blog posts. I learned a lot about the issues that were particular to Eastern Kentucky, especially. And my interest was piqued in working for a group like KFTC, just because, as someone who I grew up right on the border of Appalachia, so I was familiar with the problems that plagued that area. And I knew that personally, I wanted to work with that community. And I just didn't really, when I was, a sophomore in college going on to being a junior, didn't really know how to do that, or what sort of ways that you can actually break into working on issues facing that community. So whenever Center partnered with SHEP, it seemed like the perfect opportunity, because not only was I able to work with an organization like KFTC, but it also educates you and forces you to reflect on your experience. So I thought it was really positive and really just like awesome that SHEP had those conferences at the beginning and at the end. And it sounds like you still do that. I mean, to me, that was a huge part of the program, because it's one thing to be an intern and to learn about working in an office and to meet populations and to help people and to learn from people. But it's another thing to sit down and actually reflect on that experience. So I had the opportunity to do that. And by working with KFTC, I think the biggest takeaway that I had was just the power of community organizing and mobilizing on a grassroots level. I have taken that with me throughout my entire career. Every internship I did in law school, whether with a labor union or working at a civil rights law firm that used a community organizing model to affect positive change in New York, I saw the impact of grassroots organizing. And now that I'm in the federal government, it's still very clear to me that real change can work from the bottom up. So, I mean, SHEP introduced that to me and it's followed me throughout my career.
Excellent. Thank you, Paige. So the next segment really does have to do with career. I'm curious to know what all of you are doing now, and some of you have mentioned that in one shape or another. What you do, why you do it, what you like about it, where it is, where it takes you when you're not on Zoom, and if this is what you thought you would be doing, or if this is a different direction that's also providing skills and insight that'll take you where you want to go. So I'll shake it up because we've already gone both ways. And I'll start with Brennan. Why don't you kick us off?
Great. So I work, like I said, in the Lieutenant Governor's office of Kentucky. And to put it short, no, I didn't expect to be here. I graduated in 2019, so almost 2 years ago now, and was actually planning on going into work in a theater and doing marketing for a theater company. And then I got an interview and a job on the Bashir Coleman campaign in Kentucky and worked with the lieutenant governor there, and was lucky enough to find myself now in the administration. And essentially what I do is speech writing and social media writing for the lieutenant governor. There's two of us in her office who deal with communications, and I'm one of those folks. And I mean, I really enjoy it. It's not something that I anticipated me doing. And these days it doesn't get me to a whole lot of places because I work from home, but especially working on the campaign, getting to travel the state with the lieutenant governor. I was her driver for a large portion of the campaign, which is an experience in and of itself. But getting to explore the Commonwealth and meet all kinds of different folks was really incredible. And it, I think, brought me a new sort of knowledge and intimacy with this place that I've lived in my whole life, but areas in which I didn't quite know as well as I would have liked to. And now I think I do. So I really appreciate that.
That is super cool. And I love that you mentioned being her driver, right? I mean, there's no telling where a college education will take any of us sometimes, and then it leads you right where you needed to
Exactly.
be. That's awesome. Thank you. Paige, what about you?
Yeah, so I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but I'm currently working at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I will say when I applied for this job, COVID did not exist as a thing that anyone was expecting to happen. So my job is probably a little different now than it would have been if I had started working earlier. But so I started working here in September. And in law school, like I said earlier, my career path was driven by my SHEP internship and my interest in working in the public sector and working with communities in particular. So I already mentioned the internships that I did really focused on that. So first working at a labor union, and then working at a place called New York Lawyers for the Public Interest in New York, which gathers together, I think this is similar to what Leland said, it has a holistic approach to poverty by having social workers, community organizers, and lawyers all working together in one office. And after that, though, I did what everyone will always tell you to do in law school, which I don't know if any of you are planning on going to law school or in law school, but everyone will tell you to clerk. So I did that, which is basically like a writing boot camp. So I'm sure you all might be familiar with that, but you work for a judge. And that was my first real experience with government. I didn't expect that I would stay in the judiciary or anything, but it was a really great way for me to learn how to be objective and how to actually come to the right answer with things, as opposed to being an advocate, which my whole legal career in law school thus far, I've been an advocate for a particular position. So I think that my role in the judiciary did really help make me a better thinker, certainly made me a better writer. Did I expect to be an HHS? Not necessarily, not when I was in law school, not this particular branch of the executive. But I was interested, like I said, in working in the public sector. I knew I didn't want to work for a law firm where, your main goal is to make money for your client or prevent your client from losing money. And I wasn't really interested in having a job where I felt like money was the driving factor. HHS arose as an opportunity here in Atlanta, and it seemed like a good way to make sure that these public programs that are so important, especially now, Medicare and Medicaid, were properly run, and that I could see how it was done from the inside. So I hope that answers the question, but that's how I landed where I am. Wasn't necessarily all planned, but I am glad that I'm here.
No, that's excellent. And that does mirror the experiences of some of the other panelists we've heard from this year, of not really anticipating being where they ended up, but liking it and seeing the value and really embracing the opportunity. And I can see that in your own story. And certainly the reference to Medicare and Medicaid is so poignant right now, given the situation. LeGrand, would you like to tell us about your journey? I know you just graduated this spring. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And it's funny, Paige talking about clerking. I might get to that in a minute, but I purposefully did not clerk because I knew I wanted to work in government. And so it was like, clerking is a very apolitical thing. And so if you're like, when you get into politics, it's anyway, but that's, maybe you can back me up on that or not. But it's interesting how, for those of you thinking of law school, if any of you are, you'll get a lot of opinions on what to do, and you just got to figure it out as you go along. But all of that to say, to segue into my story, when I went to law school, I knew I wanted to get into policy work. And, policy is like this big idea that you're like, oh, like I'll be a legislator or I'll, whatever. And when I went to law school, I took a class called administrative law, and it just fell in love with it, changed my life. And administrative law is basically the law that governs the executive branch, right? So when you think about your three branches of government, the judicial branch, you have your law clerks, legislative branch, you have your legislators, and then the executive branch is the president, but also all the agencies. So HHS is an executive agency. And so I kind of shifted gears a little bit. I was like, okay, I would, love to work for a government agency. I'd love to write regulations and do that policy work. And the roundabout story to how I ended up in the governor's office is that I had a state policy fellowship here in Virginia, and that was supposed to start in June, and it got postponed a year because of COVID. And so, thankfully I had this quiz in July called the bar that I could study for and not worry about not having a job. But I ended up being able to, look for different jobs. And basically the counsel to the governor. So unlike Brennan, you said you worked on the lieutenant governor's campaign and you got a job out of that. That's usually how this happens. But the woman who had my job before me, she actually moved to DC and started working federal governments. There was an opening, and the counsel to the governor, Rita Davis, she's a Washington Lee alum, and she also went to U of R. And so my resume was floating around in the government because I had this fellowship that got canceled. And so at that point, she found my resume. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon and was like, "Hey, you want a job?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she's like, "Come interview on Wednesday." So I interviewed on Wednesday, talked to the chief of staff Friday, got hired on Monday. And, and here I am. So I'm not doing what I want to do necessarily, which is on the policy writing and making side, specifically housing. But by being in the governor's cabinet, the governor's counsel's office, I am kind of approving everything the governor does and helping, putting the final check on regulations, working with all the coronavirus executive orders. I manage all the FOIA requests for the governor's office and the governor's cabinet, which is wild, and probably takes up like half of my job. But yeah, so I've made it into government where I want to be, but not exactly, where I want to be long-term, but I'm happy to have a job and happy to be practicing law. So.
That's awesome. So LeGrand, are you one of those people who always answers your phone now when it rings?
Yes.
I feel like it would be a pretty transformational experience. Like, yeah, I do. Thanks.
Yeah. I have to keep my phone on me, unfortunately.
That's a good lesson for us. Noelle, what about you?
I'm at Sandia National Laboratories, which is a federally funded research and development center. It's a national nuclear laboratory under the Department of Energy. So we're federally funded, but run by a contractor. And most of the people who work at Sandia are scientists because we're a nuclear laboratory. We have a lot of engineers, we have a lot of physicists, and many, many people with PhDs in complicated subjects. But I actually work in the Center for Global Security and Cooperation, so more on the international affairs side of things. And in non-pandemic times, my job is a mixture of research and writing on topics including nuclear security issues, sanctions enforcement, arms control, and a mix of other Chinese malign influence is another big topic that's come up recently as we see the emergence of more great power competition. And then the other aspect of my job, which I absolutely love, is actually going to foreign countries and hosting workshops for foreign governments on counterproliferation topics. So teaching foreign governments how they can improve their nuclear security infrastructure, teaching them how to better enforce sanctions against North Korea and Iran, and other topics similar to that. We're not doing a whole lot of that right now. As you can imagine, we've been able to move some of our workshops to a remote environment, but a lot of the countries that we work with don't have the kind of Wi-Fi infrastructure to support those engagements. So it's been a real struggle to continue that work. In terms of how I got to this very niche job within the nuclear weapons infrastructure, it's not where I expected to be, I would say. I certainly was interested in government. I did many internships over the course of both my undergraduate and graduate experiences. I interned for the Department of Defense, which was a great experience. And I also interned for the Department of State at the US Embassy Beijing because I have a China studies background. And those were great experiences. And then in my second year of graduate school, I had a classmate who had gone on to work for Sandia, and she thought that my background and experiences would be a good fit for some of the work that they were doing. So she passed my resume along, and I ended up interning there during my second year of graduate school. And I liked the work so much, even though I had no background really in nuclear issues. I found that a lot of the other skills, as I was mentioning earlier, the cross-cultural communication skills that I had gained in my previous experiences, the research and writing skills, my background in China studies, all of that really applied very well to the job. So even though I didn't have the technical knowledge in nuclear issues, they assured me that was something I could pick up along the way. And to some extent I have. It's probably one of the most interesting parts of my job is all working with scientists, directly with scientists, and trying to bridge the gap between science and policy. So I will echo, I heard in LeGrand's story too, this aspect of networking. I certainly got my job because of connections that I had, because someone who was in my network believed in me and thought that my background and my skills were a good fit for the organization that they worked for. And those connections have been invaluable to me. That's how I got most of my internships and how I ultimately ended up working for the government.
Well, you can imagine I have many follow-up questions, but I want to open it up to the people who are on the call tonight to see if they have any questions before I jump into my list. And Shawn, I see you there. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to say hello, or at least just, let us know who you are?
Hold on, let me unmute. Hello, I'm Shawn Herring. I'm a professor at Missouri State University, and I'm new to the SHECP family and glad to be here. My connection in some ways goes way back to my stepdad, who actually is a Washington and Lee grad. And so he was, I should say, he still considers himself an attorney and a judge, and he worked in New York and worked in the court systems there with family law. And also he was a commissioner for the state of New York. So he always tried to get me to clerk for him, mention what you all said about that position. And so I was accepted in law school at UNC Chapel Hill, but I never went there. My whole direction, becoming a PhD and all of those things, was my path. And it was once I finished school, I should say that no one ever ends up where they think they'll be. So it's one of those types of things where my journey just took me in a whole different direction, where now, as I said, I teach at MSU. My background is technical writing, so I do a lot of the legal type of stuff, the things that you think about with scientific writing. And also I do what I always joke with my colleagues about, that I'm not one of those boring professors in English, in the English department, because I teach social media and I teach social justice, and my students create websites and blogs and their own business plans and all of those types of things associated with how we bridge the gap in the English department and that type of writing. So that's enough about me. It's not me about me now, but I wanted to just give you that background and let you know that's why I'm here. Just joined the consortium for last month, and I'm very pleased to hear all of your experiences. And it sounds like that we just keep on keeping on. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Shawn, for joining us. You're getting a taste of some of the really exciting things that our alums go on to do. And if no one else has another question, I will jump in there with one about challenges. So challenges you've faced along the way, or questions, doubts you've had about this path. Interpret it as you wish, and anyone can chime in.
Well, I'll go ahead and speak because I think I might be the elder of the group as far as the panelists go. When I graduated law school, like I said, I clerked, and that means, so first what I did was work as a staff attorney at the 11th Circuit, and then I clerked for an 11th Circuit judge. And those are term jobs, so I knew the whole time, I had to apply for my next job. And I will just say, the number one challenge you're going to face, I mean, when it comes to applying for jobs in the public sector, I shouldn't say the number one. I mean, everyone's different, but the number one job or the number one challenge I faced was just that you will be faced with so much radio silence. You will send out so many applications and never hear anything. And that happened to me a lot. And it was really disappointing because I felt like I had worked so hard at Center. I had worked so hard in law school. I thought I had ticked all the boxes, and I cannot even tell you how many jobs I've applied for, and I just never even heard back about it. The public sector is so competitive. I mean, there are a lot of people who really want to get into this field and get into these jobs, whether it's working for the government, working for a nonprofit. But just, you can't let that stop you from applying. Eventually something will work out. You will get to where you need to be. But I don't know what stage you all are in. I don't know if you're in undergrad. I don't know if you're applying for jobs right now. But if you feel like you are not getting any responses, or you just keep getting rejection after rejection in form emails, which the worst, it will end. You will get a job. Just keep trying, because this work is so valuable, it's so important, and it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I'll back you up on that, Paige, for sure. This work is so important, and I think I'll put it in my own words, I guess, just to reiterate what you said. Staying the course was really hard for me in law school, because the public interest government sphere is kind of, if you're in law school, or really, whatever you're doing post undergrad, is a path that's very competitive, and it's a path where there's not a whole lot of jobs out there. And so you have to really send out 18 different applications and go to 3 different career fairs and take what you get. And, I was fortunate enough to land some really good stuff, and I worked in DC for 2 summers, and I got a lot of really good experience, but it took me a while to get there. And, it's wild to think that, like, the job that I have now just landed in my lap. Like, that really doesn't happen. So maybe I'm not the right person to speak to this right now. But yeah, just staying the course and not getting distracted by, in law school, we talk about big law, which is basically just going and being an attorney for a firm, and you make tons of money. But that can kind of get you sidetracked from what's really important. And then once you get out, it's hard to get back in because of all the competitive things we've talked about. So yeah, staying the course is a challenge, and obviously glad that I did.
No pressure. So this one is a little bit more of like going back into your younger self and thinking about some of the things you would have liked to have known when you were still in undergrad or when you were first graduating that would have helped you maybe avoid some pitfalls that you experienced along the way.
I'll take this one. I'll preface it by saying I think I'm the youngest, and maybe am still experiencing a lot of these things, having not graduated that long ago. But I will say, I do sort of consistently have to remind myself that I don't have to be in a big rush right now. I think, especially like looking around, even just this virtual room, and seeing how accomplished everyone is and all the great work that you all are doing, it's hard to not fall into the trap of being like, well, I wish I could say that I did that, or I wish I could say that I did that. But then I kind of stop myself, and I'm like, well, I'm doing what I think is good work. I'm really enjoying it. And, someday I will be able to hopefully give the wisdom that you all have. But I think right now, and something maybe that I would have liked to have heard more often, at least in undergrad, was just that we're all still really young, and we've got a lot of energy, I think, right now. And so putting it to work is important. You should do that, but trying to not get ahead of yourself and just kind of letting things happen when they happen is can be a healthy thing. it's something that I struggle with, and I think it's important to be said.
I think you shared a lot of wisdom, Brennan. So don't feel bad. You're in good
I know.
company.
I'm even doing it in giving that answer. It's sort of this imposter syndrome thing of like, am I supposed to be here right now talking with these people who have law degrees? And I've like, I just drove around the lieutenant governor for a few months and now I have a job. But no, I mean, I sort of just gave you the example in answering the question. So
No, I think it's super, honestly, like speaking from someone who's even older than Paige. Um, it's good to take your time. Like you don't have to do all the things at the same time and feel like there's some kind of finish line that you're going to reach one day and then you'll have done it. Like that's not it, right? There are all these different chapters and so many paths. So I think that you're right on the mark with just take your time and appreciate the phase that you're in, and that you are doing work that you find meaningful. That's a huge blessing in and of itself.
I was just going to say that I agree 100%, Brennan, that imposter syndrome in the government especially, I think is quite rampant. And I think it's because in the government, you can be given a lot of responsibility, even as an entry-level employee. So I certainly empathize with you, because I definitely have had those moments, particularly when I'm hosting workshops and there are people in the audience that are members of Congress for a foreign government and I'm 25 years old. And particularly when I'm in a country where it's very male dominated and hierarchical, and I'm a young woman, a young 25-year-old woman, telling them, hey, this is how you should be running your nuclear security enterprise. That's very intimidating. So I agree with you. And I think it's important to have confidence in your own abilities as well, and to remind yourself continuously that there's a reason why you're here in this place, and you deserve to be there. So I would say that. And then the other advice I have for people who are still in school, especially, is to take advantage of the tools and the resources that are available at your institution early and often. And this especially applies to the Career Services Department. I wish that I ended up taking advantage of Career Services later in my college experience, but I wish that I had gone to them early on as a freshman even, and sat down and said, even if I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, maybe here's some ideas that I have. What do you suggest? What types of internships should I be looking into? Do you have advice about my resume and my cover letter? How can I start to develop my network? Which is the other thing that I think every college student should really be thinking about from the beginning of your college experience, is your network. When I was an intern in DC for the first time, I tried to meet with one new person every week. And this is a very type A thing to do, so I don't think you have to do this, but this is what helped me. I kept a spreadsheet of every person that I met with, their name, where they worked, what we had talked about during our conversation, and if there were internships. At the time I was just looking for internships, but you could also include job opportunities at their institution. And I can still go back to that spreadsheet now, say tomorrow I decided I wanted to leave Sandia and do something else, and I would feel comfortable reaching out to any of those people because I have a record of what we talked about. I could say, hi, I don't know if you remember, but we met on this day, and I remember that you gave me specific advice on this topic, and that was really helpful to me. And I would love to have another coffee and just chat about what you're up to and what my career interests are going forward. And I would feel comfortable doing that because I have that record. So that's my advice. I wish I had started that from my first day at college, and just think about how many contacts I would have now if I had done that. So that's my advice to you.
Danielle, can I jump in?
Please.
Noelle, that's really terrific. And all of you probably know this, but Benjamin Franklin was the original networker in the United States. And he taught all his little coffee shop things that he did were all about that. And all about networking. Now back then, of course, it was a kind of an entrepreneurial spirit as well. Young, new people in a new world and trying to make new things happen in their businesses and other things. But that networking piece is really important. And it's not, I mean, that's what politics is all about. It's all about human interaction, right? But keep that other hat right there close by too, that hat of service, of public service. There are a lot of people get into politics because they want to aggrandize themselves, or they want to, they think they do. And a lot of the really good ones survive and do well because they really figure out after a little while, wait a minute, it's the service that's really important. Now, the ego stuff may still drive them in a lot of ways, but it's the service that keeps them in there. And it's the service that keeps them adding value to the world and adding value to themselves. And so that service piece is really terrific. And so, and I think that's the SHEP, a part of the SHEP model, as well, is this whole service to other folks. And as far as, what you're talking about, Brennan, getting out there and driving the car and doing all, hey, that's what it's all about. I mean, it's, if you're a drama guy, that you also, there's somebody's got to be back there doing all the stage work, right? And all the technical work to make the production happen. It's not just the lead, characters on stage. It's that whole other 100 people that are making something happen. Same in this world, same in this world. And yet you're learning at every stage, at every piece, every conversation, every trip in the car, with somebody. You may not know that, but you're building up this base of experience. You saw the guy that Biden just appointed to be Secretary of State is going to be a Secretary of State choice. Same kind of guy, he came up through the ranks that way, and learned something every step of the way and made himself, added value to himself, but him adding value to his work. So you look at the resumes of any of those people who've been out there and been successful. They started young and they started early, in doing this kind of work and recognize the value of it. So, I mean, I've done a lot of that stuff too. I'm the oldest guy in this room, I'm sure. And I can tell you, that you start young and you build on it, and don't forget the enjoyment of it, and don't forget the reason why you're doing it. I made a choice early on to not run for elective office. My family had been, my father was, a lot of that early in my life. And I worked for a lot of campaigns, but I figured out that I could add a lot of value coming into it and my public service would be in doing nonprofit work and in participating on the public policy side on commissions. I've been on 6 or 7 or 8 state commissions. I can't really remember how many, but adding that value, being part of that process. And I get a huge amount of personal satisfaction out of that, seeing the product of those things happen. It's fantastic. I'm sure a lot of people feel they get a lot of value out of being an elected official. That's fine. But there are just many, many roles and many, many ways to add value. And so you're on that track. All of you are saying those same things, and you're on that track. So I'm just trying to encourage you, keep the faith, keep smiling, keep enjoying your work, because that's what it's all about.
I would also like to add, if I could, that you talked about the imposter syndrome. And I would say one of the things that's very important in life is to be yourself as much as possible. And just that will shine. I remember being a young professor and thinking I had that imposter syndrome. And if I didn't go into the classroom and say the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of its sides, people would think, oh my God, he's, not smart. And so, but I found that just being myself, and if you say 1 + 1 = 2, that's a lot of times comes across much better than, what someone else would deliver in another manner. So it's just all about, as Noelle said, networking and believing in yourself, as Brennan said, and as Paige has talked about, with all of the opportunities that she's encountered. And a lot of it, you'll find even more joy. As Leland also had mentioned, things didn't go exactly as he wanted, but if you just be yourself, a lot of it will fall into place as well.
Absolutely. And all of you are working with different populations and in different places and different venues. And I think that's one of the most exciting parts about public service, at least from my vantage point, is it can change. Like as we change and our interests change, we can also adapt and pursue another path and still add value, like Jim said, and not feel constrained to a really small box. This is such an expansive way to be in the world and also practice our work, whatever shape or form that might take. So I know we're getting towards the end of our hour together. And one question that I like to ask people is how they recharge. That could be a lot of things, right? Like you've heard self-care, I'm sure. And I'm a student of social work, so I feel like that's ingrained in my mind. It'll never leave me. But I'd like to know, what do you do? Like what fills up your cup? What brings you joy? Maybe that involves engaging with your community as a volunteer. It can be whatever it is to you, but I'd love to hear about it and some of those strategies that we can share with alums and other members of the SHEP community, because we can't really be of service if we're not taking care of ourselves.
I mentioned I'm was a drama major, and one thing that this pandemic has allowed me to do is virtual theater, which wasn't a thing like a year ago, but it's very different from theater. But being able to do that has been really fun, and I have some friends who started a fully digital theater company, which is really amazing. And being able to express myself artistically is I guess the way that I find that satisfaction or that escape, whatever you want to call it. That's really helpful to me. Yeah.
On the volunteering aspect, I think if you're looking for a way to continue the good work that you've done through the Shepherd program, volunteering can be that way for you. My career is not necessarily directly related to poverty. I think there are implications with the work that I do for poverty, but it's not directly related to poverty alleviation, right? So, but I still wanted to be able to contribute in some way. So I volunteer with the Junior League of Albuquerque, and the population that we serve is individuals who are transitioning out of the foster care program. It's an incredibly vulnerable population. So that's one way that I recharge and also contribute to a passion that I've held, since my participation in the SHEP program and before. I also foster cats. So at any given time, I have a couple cats in my house. In the rural community where I live, there's a large population of stray animals, so it's really a needed service there. And then more recently, during the pandemic, I've really gotten into outdoors and hiking, which is awesome because really it's not something that I was ever interested in. And, one good thing to come out of COVID-19, it kind of forced people, if they wanted to get out of their house, to explore the great outdoors. So I've been doing a lot of hiking. New Mexico is absolutely beautiful, and there are so many amazing national parks, amazing remote hiking spots. I did a 3-day backpacking trip this summer, which was amazing. So I encourage you to get outside, explore, and particularly if you have national parks within your radius, I really encourage you to seek those out.
So I'll just answer the self-care part of the question. This is something that I've been doing imperfectly since I started law school. And that is embrace a slower rhythm of life. I think too often, especially in fast-paced jobs, government jobs, you always want to get to the next thing. You always want to do more. You always want to be more productive, which is good. But there's a temptation to move too fast. And so it's even things like driving slower, like chewing your food like 5 or 6 times before you swallow it, like, when someone interrupts you, hold up your hand politely and finish whatever you're reading and then say, hello to them. So just trying not to get too hurried, which I think the pandemic has been good for that. But at the same time, for some people I've talked to, it's made it worse, right? Because you have all of this free time now and you're like, what can I cram into it? So just, embrace a slower pace of life.
LeGrand's self-care strategy is so wise, and I mostly just watch the Great British Baking Show. So I will say, other than doing that and going on lots of long walks and calling my mom a lot more than I ever have before in my life, I have kind of found myself, since working as a law clerk, which, like LeGrand said, is apolitical, and since working in HHS, where I know I'm doing good work for people, but I'm working for a particular administration right now, and I feel like I want to still give back to the community and make sure that I'm still connected with the subject matter that made me passionate about wanting to do a SHEP internship and made me want to go into law in the first place. There are so many amazing communities doing socially distanced, COVID-friendly work right now in cities like Atlanta. I'm sure in cities like Louisville. I have seen such a digital movement ever since, a lot of the BLM protests this summer. Our communities are really coming together to help each other. I know one way in particular in Atlanta, for example, there's a group that set up community fridges across the city for food insecure and our unhoused population. So I volunteer to go clean a fridge or restock a fridge once or twice a week. I try to. And I keep in touch with groups on Instagram, as trite as that might sound, with groups on Instagram and seeing what they're doing across the community to help other people. That allows me to still contribute to that population, even if I feel like my job doesn't necessarily directly work with those populations and doesn't necessarily directly address issues surrounding poverty. It is a way that I can stay connected with those systems.
Absolutely. And that's actually a great segue. Today is Giving Tuesday, as you may know. And I did a post earlier promoting this panel and talking about how SHEP and other organizations, like some of the ones you mentioned, are willing recipients of time, talent, treasure, whatever you got, right? It doesn't have to be big bucks all the time, but our compassion and our talents that we've developed, the expertise and connections that all of you have, are invaluable to the people who are trying to do this work day in and day out and might need an infusion of something from the outside. So I think these are wonderful examples, the things that you shared and the ways that you give back. For me personally, service and self-care go hand in hand. And I think it goes way back, right? Like Jim was saying, sometimes people start really young and it's sort of in your blood. So I can hear a lot of parallels with the stories that you all shared tonight. And again, I'm so grateful for you all taking the time out of your evening to be here with us. This won't be the last time, I hope, that you will connect with SHEP. And if there's anything we can do to help you get where you want to be or get connected with our amazing students, don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you all. Take care and be safe.
Thank you.